One of the things that makes scientists so special is that they are curious. They observe, like we talked about the other day, and they ask lots of questions, and they always want to try to find out what the answers are. So the story we're going to read today is called Ada Twist, Scientist. It's by Andrea Beatty, illustrated by David Roberts. And it's about a little girl who is a scientist, even at a very young age. Ada Marie, said not a word till the day she turned 3. She bounced in her crib and looked all around, observing the world, but not making a sound. She learned how to climb and made her big break, with a trail of chaos left in her wake. She ran through the day chasing each sound in sight, and didn't slow down till she conked out at night. Her parents were frazzled, but tried not to freak, as Ada grew bigger and still did not speak. Clearly young Ada, with lots in her head, would have something to say when it ought to be said. So right now she's doing a lot of observing like we talked about yesterday. That's just what happened when Ada turned 3. She tore through the house on a fact-finding spree and climbed up the clock just as high as she could. Her parents yelled, "Stop!" as all good parents would. Ada's chin quivered, but she did not cry. She took a deep breath and she simply asked, "Why?" Why does it tick and why does it talk? Why don't we call it a granddaughter clock? Why are there pointy things stuck to a rose? Why are there hairs up inside of your nose? She started with why and then what, how, and when. By bedtime she came back to why once again. She drifted to sleep as her dazed parents smiled at the curious thoughts of their curious child, who wanted to know what the world was about. They kissed her and whispered, "You'll figure it out." So she's being a good scientist right now. She's asking why things happen, and what's going to happen if something happens, and how something happens, and when will something happen. Her parents kept up with their high-flying kid, whose questions and chaos both grew as she did. Why, what, how, when, why? What does it do? What is it for? Why won't it? How can I find out? How does it? How? Will it be the same? What if? Will it? When will it? When? What? And so her parents are trying to answer all her questions, but she has a lot of them. Even Miss Greer found her hands were quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. But this much was clear about Miss Ada Twist. She had all the traits of a great scientist. So she's trying to find out why things are happening and what they're doing and what's going to happen when she does different things. Ooh, I like how she's wearing her safety equipment. She's got her goggles and her gloves on. Ada was busy that first day of spring, testing the sounds that make mockingbirds sing, when a horrible stench whacked her right in the nose. A pungent aroma that curled up her toes. "Zowie!" said Ada, which got her to thinking. "What is the source of that terrible stinking? How does a nose know there's something to smell? And does it still stink if there's no nose to tell?" She rattled off questions and tapped on her chin. She'd start at the start where she ought to begin. A mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. This was the moment that Ada loved best. Ada did research to learn all she could of smelling and smells, both the stinky and good. One hypothesis Ada thought could be true. The terrible stink came from Dad's cabbage stew. She tested and tested, but soon Ada knew it was time to come up with hypotheses too. Remember, a hypothesis is the guess that the scientist makes, and then they test to find out if it's right. Then zowie, the stink struck again, just like that. Hypothesis 2, it's caused by the cat. The cat couldn't make such a stink on its own. It needed perfume and some fancy cologne. So young Ada tested. The test was a flop. She started again, but her parents yelled, "Stop!" Uh-oh, what is she going to do? Oh, yeah, you can't do that to a cat. That's not a good thing. To the thinking chair. Oh, wait. Ada Marie, to the thinking chair now by the time we count 3. Enough, said her mother. That's it, said her dad. Her parents were frustrated, frazzled, and mad. Why? Ada questioned. Her mother said, no. What? Ada queried. Her father said, go. You've ruined our supper. You've made the cat stink. Enough with your questions. Now sit there and think. She looked at her parents. Her heart turned to goo. Poor Ada Twist didn't know what to do. Sometimes when you're a scientist and you are experimenting, you have to be careful about where and when you experiment. Experimenting in your mom and dad's house without their permission? Not so good. She sat all alone by herself in the hall, and Ada once more could say nothing at all. And so Ada sat, and she sat, and she sat, and she thought about science and Stu and the cat, and how her experiments made such a mess. Does it have to be so? Is that part of success? Are messes the problem? And while she was thinking, what was the source of that terrible stinking? Ada Marie did what scientists do. She asked a small question, and then she asked 2. And each of those led her to 3 questions more, and some of those questions resulted in 4. As Ada got thinking, she really dug in. She scribbled her questions and tapped on her chin. She started at why, and then what, how, and when. At the end of the hall, she reached why once again. Oh my goodness, I don't think she's making smart choices here. She's definitely smart. She's got lots of questions. But I don't think she should be writing on the wall. Her parents calmed down and they came back to talk. They looked at the hallway and just had to gawk. No patch of bare paint could be seen on the wall. The thinking chair now was the great thinking hall. They watched their young daughter and sighed as they did what they would do with this curious kid who wanted to know what the world was about. They smiled and figured and whispered, we'll figure it out. And that's what they did, because that's what you do. When your kid has a passion and a heart that is true, they remade their world, and now they're all in the act of helping young Ada sort fiction from fact. She asks lots of questions. How could she resist? It's all in the heart of a young scientist. So look what they did for her. They don't want her to draw on the wall anymore, so they gave her a big, ginormous roll of paper to do it on. And they made her all sorts of things so that she can do her experiments. That's pretty cool. And as for that smell, what could Ada Twist do but learn all she can with her friends in grade 2? Will they discover the stink that curls toes? Well, that is the question. And someday, who knows? I like how she's wearing her fancy goggles to keep her eyes safe. But remember what they told us about smelling and things in science? We need to waft. And she's not doing that. But the reason we watched this and read about this was because the great thing that happens with science is we ask questions. And those questions lead us to hypotheses. A hypothesis is our best guess and our prediction. And when we predict and we guess, then the next thing that happens is we have to test those hypotheses. And after that, we either decide that our hypothesis is right, or we decide that it's wrong and we have to start all over again. In the story, Ada never found out what made the bad stink. But she didn't give up either. And that's what scientists do. They ask questions, they make a hypothesis, they test their hypothesis, and they do it all over again, over and over, because there's never, ever, ever going to be an answer to everything. And even when you've figured something out, there's still more to learn about it. So, while you're thinking about things today and you're wondering about science, start thinking about maybe yesterday you did some watching and some observing. Maybe there was something in your observations that you have questions about. How could you find out the answers to those questions? Are they questions that maybe you could look up something in a book or read about it or find it on the internet? Or are they questions that maybe you might need to do an experiment for with your parents' permission? Please do not do any experiments without your parents' permission. So, young scientists, have a great day and do your seesaw activity to go with this book.